Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. We recently did a video about Senator Ziono. We're basically trying to figure out whether he was just an idiot career politician and Imperial sympathizer or my uncle. The amount of comments, you sons of bitches. But anyway, I want to do a second video talking about this guy, and I swear it's not just because this guy looks like me and I want to rehab his image. I want to talk about the discrepancy between what we as the audience can see and what these senators and other very incompetent New Republic officials see in universe. So what do we see as an audience? Well, first of all, we all know about the future of the New Republic. We know about the rise of the First Order. We know about the destruction of Hosnian Prime, more than 2 or 3 decades after the events of the Ahsoka series. We've seen how dangerous and motivated Moff Gideon is with this small battle group. We've seen the Imperial warlords gathered together talking about keeping a low profile until Thrawn arrives so that they don't waste their resources. And that's because we get to hear from the omniscient narrator. We can understand things and see things that not even a New Republic senator can understand. Heck, not even Mon Mothma or the New Republic intelligence agencies know what's going on. The latter's too busy frying poor Dr. Pershing's brain here. He's definitely only going to be drinking soup after this. Aside from the odd Jedi or Force user who can actually see the future using the Force, or these witches who can read the threads of fate, no one knows what's going on more in the Star Wars galaxy than the audience does. And so it can be quite easy for us to take a look at Senator Ziono here and completely dismiss him for being either a complete idiot or a traitor or both. When the reality is, Senator Ziono's point of view over here is not going to be as uncommon as you'd think. I think a lot of other senators share his viewpoint.
Now, we as senators serve the people of that republic, and I can tell you, they want no part of any further conflict.
You act like we have a choice.
Don't we? I see no enemy. The Imperial fleet is scattered and broken. They have no centralized command.
The Imperial fleet is scattered and broken. There's no central command. If you guys had no idea about the sequels and all that other stuff I talked about, that's probably what your point of view would have been too if you were a citizen of the New Republic. Typically, most people, even in a republic like this with free media and relatively open access to the military, are going to get things wrong. Just because you live in a free society doesn't automatically mean you're going to be better than everyone else, that you're going to know exactly what's going on. Yes, you have better access to information, there's less restrictions and censorship, but there's still going to be a lot of misinformation, a lot of research you're going to have to do. The typical New Republic citizen is going to be listening to trusted politicians, military leaders, think tanks, media personalities, individuals who specialize in this type of information gathering, and you can't blame the average citizen for that. They don't have time to do all that research. They have real jobs that they have to go to. And I guarantee you the majority of the people in the mainstream in the New Republic are going to be repeating these statements about the Empire being gone. And it's not a conspiracy. They're not trying to mislead people purposely. It's just that sometimes you don't have all the information, and sometimes there's just a lot of incompetency. Or maybe that's just what the data says because the Imperial Remnant has done such a good job hiding their numbers. You know, the Empire lost all of their major shipyards, including the only ones large enough to easily refit Super Star Destroyers. Palpatine is dead, there's no Imperial warlord stepping up and uniting the remaining Imperial fleets in the galaxy. This is very much a failure by the New Republic intelligence community to gather the proper information to figure out what's actually going on, and this leads to overconfidence in the New Republic security and its military forces. And you know, this happens in our own world a lot. While in general, these institutions like the media or public personalities like politicians do try to get things accurate and try to get things right as much as possible, it's very clear that they are wrong a lot. And it's, I think, most of the time because they're just humans. They make mistakes, they're incompetent. Sometimes they could be outright lying, but you know, we never can really know. And I think this is a reality that we all have to get comfortable with. This is just how our system always worked. I mean, you guys remember the whole WMDs in Iraq situation? I was like 12 at the time, or 11, and I remember thinking, oh God, Saddam Hussein has these weapons, we need to go in there and get his ass. I remember seeing Colin Powell, one of the most trusted figures at the time in the UN, holding that tiny vial trying to convince us that anthrax was everywhere. You know, Colin Powell up until this point had been saying that invading Iraq was a bad idea, and now he was even on board. I didn't want anthrax in my monthly PC Gamer magazine in the mail, so, you know, I couldn't really vote, but I was like, yeah, let's do this. I didn't see any problems with flattening a random country in the Persian Gulf that I knew very little about. They gotta put a warning label on that sign. I'm not even wearing pants right now, but I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. And that's the type of mentality that caused America to launch 2 costly wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We lost so many good men and women to that war. We killed so many Iraqis and Afghans for very little gain. And most of us were convinced at the time that this was the right thing to do. Now, I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't trust the media or that you shouldn't trust elected officials or experts on things. You should probably trust them more than you trust the random people on the internet that post up random stuff like that the fires in Hawaii are caused by space lasers. The point is, you really shouldn't trust most things when you see them. You really need to vet everything. Or at least find sources that have a record of telling the truth that you've confirmed time and time again. Well, actually, being truthful isn't enough. You can be truthful but incompetent, so you also need to be truthful and competent and get your facts right. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, that's why I did that whole sponsor of Ground News a few videos back. I truly believe that the media landscape is becoming more and more saturated and more difficult to kind of decipher. I mean, it's really hard, if you think about it, for these New Republic senators to actually understand what's going on with the Imperial Remnant. Clearly, the New Republic defense fleet is stretched thin, and they're also being told not to engage outside of their own territories, which is where the Imperial Remnant is. It's in the Outer Rim. And plus, this is like maybe one of 50 galactic news stories these senators are actually following. They probably have another dozen or so stories from their own local sectors that they have to pay attention to. They're just way too busy. They're bombarded with information just like the rest of us. And so, yeah, I think if you take a close look at these senators at this meeting, they're kind of afraid when they hear the name Thrawn. They're kind of in denial. They don't really want to listen to this one lone voice who's telling them that something's wrong when every other voice in the room is like, no, everything is fine. We're gonna be okay.
The Imperial fleet is scattered and broken. They have no centralized command.
That's a really concrete statement for her to make. I mean, here's a senator with no military experience making very clear and concrete predictions about what the state of the Imperial Remnant is. And clearly, the New Republic has no eyes out there. How could they know about this? And so when people make these type of statements, you gotta be a little bit suspicious. But again, I do have some empathy for her. I mean, it's understandable for her to think this way. At the Battle of Endor, we witnessed crazy amounts of destruction. Admiral Piet really screwed up by parking that Super Star Destroyer so close to the second Death Star. I mean, the second that bridge got taken out by the A-Wing, it was over.
Piet.
Then the second Death Star gets destroyed, and let's not forget about the first Death Star. I mean, how many millions of sailors and soldiers were lost in those 2 incidents? And then between Endor and Jaku, the Empire went from being a well-oiled killing machine to being a, pretty sluggish and weak military force. And this was mostly because of Emperor Palpatine's contingency plan. He literally had his protege Gallius Rax lead Imperial Star Destroyers into ambushes and get them destroyed piecemeal. These ships were always outnumbered and never able to put much of a fight. I used to think that this was just because Emperor Palpatine wanted to be vindictive. And yes, Operation Cinder, which was basically a scorched earth policy made by Palpatine, was vindictive and probably unnecessary. But all that other stuff, feeding his ships into unprepared situations where they were outgunned by the New Republic, that was designed brilliantly to feed the ego of the New Republic Defense Fleet, to convince the senators that they were easily winning this war and that there would be no problems. Of course Palpatine would do this. He was always 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of his enemies. This made the New Republic military and its political leaders lazy and content. It allowed him to continue building his forces unharassed in the unknown region. He purposely made the Imperial Remnant look extremely weak. And if you recall, the remaining Imperial warlords were also trying to keep their heads down and pretend like they were weak. I mean, if you really think about it, the last year of the Galactic Civil War made no sense. The Rebel Alliance should not have been able to destroy the Empire that quickly. They still had tens of thousands of Imperial-class Star Destroyers. How did that just disappear overnight? I mean, the New Republic had some really good units. You had Red Squadron, Phoenix Squadron. You had heroes like Luke Skywalker, capable strategists like Admiral Akbar. But the reality was the New Republic had rebranded itself from the Rebel Alliance just a few years earlier. These were skilled guerrilla fighters who were used to hit and run attacks, but they were completely new to this type of grand space battle that they were involved in now. They were never really supposed to defeat the Empire after Endor, especially not that quickly. And so Emperor Palpatine was feeding these ships one at a time into gigantic New Republic defense fleets, and many of these Star Destroyers, being one of the most difficult ships to supply from a logistical standpoint, were low on fuel, low on munitions, they didn't have repairs done, they might have been missing new crew because of casualties suffered from previous battles. They were facing a shadow of what the Imperial Navy used to be. Towards the last days of the war, thanks to Gallius Rax, that's Palpatine's protege again, the entire Imperial Remnant fleet gathered at Jaku and just waited there for a few months. I mean, the New Republic had enough time to actually debate in the Senate whether they could send resources and build an armada to take out the last of the Imperial Remnant. It took them months before they were actually able to get approval. I mean, Leia had to really twist some arms. And so when that battle started, everyone in the galaxy knew about it. It was one of the biggest events of the decade. It's like how you have the Pro Bowl now in between the championship and Super Bowl so that you have an extra week so you can watch more interviews and more hype about that final game. That's what Jaku was. Jaku was supposed to be the last and final battle, and up until that moment, it wasn't actually certain that the New Republic could win. The Imperial fleet had 3 different battle groups. They had the Super Star Destroyer Ravager. The New Republic defense fleet was still kind of small in comparison. And so when they actually beat the Empire, the galaxy was ecstatic. The New Republic had so much confidence in themselves. They truly believed that they were winning these battles, and this wasn't just Emperor Palpatine trying to kill off his own forces. And it's after that battle the New Republic became soft. They were tricked. They believed that they had easily defeated this enemy of theirs. And Mon Mothma, bless her heart, I mean, she really wanted the conflict to end as soon as possible. She began talking about demilitarization weeks after Endor. The war hadn't even ended. And once the war did end, she had the foresight to immediately offer pardons to all Imperial officers and enlisted personnel if they surrendered. She didn't want to go all Treaty of Versailles and punish the Empire. You know, she knew that that would actually make the war longer and create more pockets of fanatic Imperial holdouts. And that's kind of who Mon Mothma was. She was always a soft-hearted person.
The Empire has been choking us so slowly we're starting not to notice. The time has come to force their hand.
People will suffer.
That's the plan.
It was her greatest strength as a leader, and it's what kept her from prematurely committing the rebellion to battles that they had no business fighting early on in the Galactic Civil War. But when the war ended, that soft-heartedness became her biggest flaw. Her New Republic amnesty program was a terrific idea, and it brought many good Imperials back into civilized society and allowed them to be functioning citizens in a short period of time. There's also a lot of free labor, which was probably really good for the New Republic, but they were far too relaxed with their background checks and allowed for some serious monsters to fall through the cracks. But more importantly, imagine the effect the New Republic amnesty program had on the average citizen's view of Imperials. Imagine the effect it had on senators who were overseeing this program. I mean, seeing all those former Imperials now dressed in blue suits, smiling and being nice and helping people.
We have former Imperials working throughout every level of the New Republic government, and they have all taken an oath of loyalty.
It's no wonder everyone in the New Republic believed that the war was over, and yeah, maybe that's what they wanted to believe, so why not just kind of fall into that delusion a little more? I mean, that's how you had Imperial spies literally stealing entire hyperdrives from the shipyard on Corellia. This is why it's always important to have a devil's advocate, a so-called 10th man at every level of governance and all the major institutions. You need to have opposition. You can't just have unanimous agreement about things because it leads to disasters, blind spots. But in this case, the 10th man happened to be individuals like Carson Teva, a New Republic Ranger who patrolled the Outer Rim, and Hera Syndulla, a war hero but also a daughter of a revolutionary. These are military people, and maybe they just seemed intimidating to these politicians who haven't served. Maybe they were intimidated by how they talk and what they talked about. I mean, imagine you're working on this bill to basically rebuild the Mid-Rim, which was destroyed by the Mid-Rim offensive and retreat. And suddenly, Hera Syndulla, this rebel hero, comes out of nowhere and says Thrawn's coming back. And not only is Thrawn coming back, he supposedly is being supported by Dark Jedi mercenaries, witches, and space whales. Like, what are you supposed to think when someone says that? Most of us, if we were in the Senate, we would see Hera Syndulla as a loose cannon. And remember, this is 4 to 5 years after the Battle of Jaku. It's been 4 to 5 years since another major battle has happened between the Imperial Remnant and the New Republic. And yes, a lot of you guys might be like, oh, well, that's a short period of time. Really think about it. I mean, human beings, these leaders of the New Republic, we all have very short memory spans. It's just how we're built, you know? 5 years can seem like forever. What is it that Francis Fukuyama wrote in that book, The End of History? No more conflicts, no more political struggles. He wrote that book in 1992. Just a few years after the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall. And look, he's a much smarter person than me, than most of you guys probably do, but he got it completely wrong. He was short-sighted. He felt like a few years of peace, you know, that was enough to guarantee peace forever. So the fact that these New Republic senators are all blind as hell and trying their hardest to pretend like there's no such thing as the Imperial Remnant, it's really not surprising at all. I mean, this is the New Republic. Remember, these guys aren't like hyper-nationalist Imperials who want to just militarize and destroy every problem with a turbo laser. These are pretty peaceful, you know, probably progressive, loving kinds of people. These New Republic senators seem well-meaning. They want to focus on the people, developing economic ties. I mean, so many people have been suffering after 20 years of imperial rule, followed by more than half a decade of intense fighting. The fog of war is a real thing. I mean, I remember when Russia attacked Ukraine, although it was very clear what was happening, it took a lot of leaders, even European leaders, a long time to kind of react. I mean, I'm not talking about the Central European leaders, like the Polish and the Czech. They knew what was going on. They have like a historical memory about stuff like that. I'm talking about guys like Macron, who wanted to meet Putin in person, as if his wonderful French charisma could somehow reach that maniac on the other side of this massive table. Talk about social spacing, huh? What about Olaf Schultz? Okay, that's actually taken out of context. You know, he wasn't being toxic and dueling other people without face protection like old German politicians used to do. He just got in a bike crash or something. But yeah, Schultz and many Germans were still pondering on how it would look if Germany placed themselves on the other side of a conflict with Russia, you know, given how that went down historically last time. It's probably a good thing that the Germans have a lot of self-control right now and they try to avoid war as much as possible. But yeah, both of these major powers in Western Europe hesitated. Now, in all fairness, both Macron and Schultz have done a pretty good job since then. So I guess our point is, in hindsight, our opinions really mean absolutely nothing. I mean, in the moment, things are very confusing. People get things wrong. Powerful institutions like the media, politicians, these individuals get it wrong. I'm not saying you should never trust these individuals, but you should just keep in mind that everyone is human. Everyone has the potential of being incompetent. And so if you are going to make major life choices based on information that you're hearing from the news or from politicians or, God forbid, some crazy person on the internet, make sure you do your own research first. I think I'm going to leave it off with that. That's the lesson we learned from these New Republic senators. See you guys next time.